It was a gloomy afternoon, the kind where the sky was overcast and the rain drizzled in a constant melancholic rhythm. Max, a noble German shepherd, stood outside the nursing home, his large, dark eyes watching the entrance as if he understood the gravity of the moment. The pavement beneath his paws was slick, and the cool air seemed to chill him, but he didn't mind. His mission today was more important than the weather. It was about loyalty, love, and the bond he shared with his benefactor, Mr. Daniels. Max had been through a lot in his life, from the street corners, hungry and abandoned, to the warm, loving arms of Mr. Daniels. He had known nothing but care from the man who had saved him. Today, however, the dog felt a heaviness in his chest. Something in the air told him that this visit would be different from all the others. It wasn't just another check-in. It was the last. Inside, the nursing home was eerily quiet. The faint sounds of medical machines hummed softly, but the silence between those sounds was deafening. Max padded down the hallway, his paws making only the softest of sounds on the floor. He recognized the scent of Mr. Daniels in the air, the familiar notes of old leather and the slight hint of his cologne. The door at Mr. Daniels' room stood slightly ajar, and Max's heart skipped a beat as he stepped inside. There, lying in bed, was Mr. Daniels, the man who had taken care of him, given him a home, and loved him. Max felt a pang in his heart. The room was dimly lit, and the old man looked frail, his face tired, but his eyes still held that spark of recognition. Max stepped forward, his tail wagging slowly, unsure whether it was a greeting or a sign of sadness. Mr. Daniels was resting in bed, looking smaller than he ever had before. His once strong, broad frame had thinned over time, and his skin seemed to sag against the thin sheets. His breathing was slow, shallow, and the rise and fall of his chest was barely noticeable. But his eyes, those eyes that had seen the world through so many years, were still sharp, still full of life despite the frailty of his body. Max's heart swelled with affection as he approached the bed, his paws silent on the wooden floor. The dog's movements were slow, calculated, as if every step was a step closer to something irreversible. His large, brown eyes fixed on Mr. Daniels, searching for any sign of recognition. When the old man's eyes met his, the faintest smile appeared on his lips, a smile filled with love and sadness all at once. "You came," Mr. Daniels whispered, his voice raspy. "I knew you would." Max, in his usual manner, nuzzled the old man's hand, his nose pushing gently against the worn skin. The man's hand, frail and shaking, lifted slowly to stroke the dog's fur. It was a tender gesture, one that spoke of years of companionship, of mutual care, and of a bond that could never be broken by time or circumstance. For a long while, there was silence between them. Max laid down beside the bed, his body curled up protectively, as if to shield Mr. Daniels from the harshness of the world outside. He had always been a loyal companion. Ever since that first day Mr. Daniels had found him on the streets, hungry and alone. And now, as a man lay in his final days, Max remained just as steadfast, just as devoted. Mr. Daniels' voice cracked as he spoke again, each word an effort. "You saved me, Max. When I was alone, when I had nothing, you were there. You were my strength." Max tilted his head, his eyes filled with understanding. He had saved Mr. Daniels, yes, but the truth was they had both saved each other. The dog had given him the will to live through difficult years, and Mr. Daniels had provided the care, warmth, and companionship Max had never known before. Their lives had been intertwined in ways neither could fully express, but they both understood the depth of their connection. Mr. Daniels closed his eyes for a moment, as if resting. Max's tail gave a slow wag, as though acknowledging the shared history they had. But then, as Max lay quietly by his master's side, something strange began to happen. The air grew colder. Max's ears perked up, his senses heightened, and he shifted uneasily. The faint sound of machines in the room seemed to falter, their rhythm disturbed. Max lifted his head, eyes scanning the room for any sign of danger or disturbance. But there was nothing except the growing silence that filled the space. Mr. Daniels stirred in bed, a faint groan escaping his lips. The dog's gaze shifted from the old man to the door, as though something or someone was about to enter. And then, just as quickly as the silence had fallen, The door to the room creaked open. Max's body stiffened, his hackles rising. He growled low, instinctively protecting Mr. Daniels. The figure that entered the room was not a nurse or a doctor, but someone Max hadn't seen in years. It was John. John had once been a part of Mr. Daniels' life, an old friend who had drifted away, leaving the elderly man behind in his time of need. Max, who had been a silent observer of their past, had never trusted John. But now, as the man stepped into the room, looking weathered and regretful, the air between them was thick with unresolved history. Mr. Daniels' eyes flickered open, and he looked at the man who had once been his friend. The recognition was clear in his eyes, though his voice faltered. "John, is that really you?" John stepped forward, his face weary, his eyes filled with guilt. "I'm sorry, Mr. Daniels. I never should have left you. I should have been here. But I didn't know how to face you." Max's growl deepened, his body positioning itself between Mr. Daniels and John. He wasn't sure what the man wanted, but he didn't trust him. Not now. Not when his master was so vulnerable. The protective instincts that had been honed over years of guarding Mr. Daniels surged within him. But Mr. Daniels, with a weak hand, motioned for Max to move aside. "It's all right, Max," he whispered. "He's come to make amends. Let him in." Max hesitated, his eyes narrowing, but he obeyed. The dog stepped aside, though his body remained tense. John approached the bed slowly, the air thick with unsaid words. "I came to say goodbye," John said softly, his voice heavy with regret. "I came to make peace, to ask for your forgiveness. I should have never left you, not when you needed me most." Mr. Daniels' lips parted in a faint smile, weak but sincere. "I forgave you a long time ago, John. You left when you were scared. But I always knew you'd come back when the time was right." Max watched them, his heart heavy. He had always known that Mr. Daniels carried no ill will, but the man in front of him, he was still a stranger. Yet, as the conversation continued, Max's growl softened. He sensed no immediate threat, and perhaps this was a moment of healing that Mr. Daniels needed. The room fell silent once again. Mr. Daniels and John exchanged quiet words, the weight of years of regret hanging between them. Max, ever the vigilant protector, stayed by Mr. Daniels' side, his eyes darting between the two men, watching for any sudden movements. The tension in the air was palpable, but there was something else, a subtle shift. As the minutes passed, Max could feel the room change, like something deep inside was about to break free. Mr. Daniels had always been a strong man mentally, if not physically, and his acceptance of John's apology was proof of that. The air in the room was heavy with a mixture of forgiveness and sorrow, as though the unspoken words between them had finally found a way to breathe. Max, for the first time, relaxed a little, sensing the peace that had settled between the two men. But then the machines by the bedside, those constant mechanical beeps, began to act strangely. The rhythm faltered, the sound shifting into something unsettling. Max's ears perked up. His nose twitched as he sniffed the air, his body going rigid. Something was wrong. Mr. Daniels' breathing became shallow, erratic. He coughed softly, and John immediately rushed to his side, panic in his eyes. "Mr. Daniels, are you all right? What's happening?" But the old man didn't respond. Instead, he reached weakly for Max's paw, his hand trembling as he grasped the dog's leg. Max leaned down, nuzzling his master's hand with his nose, his heart pounding in his chest. "Max!" Mr. Daniels whispered, his voice barely audible. It's time. I've lived a good life, and I'm not afraid to go. But I need you to promise me something, boy." Max looked into his eyes, sensing the gravity of the moment. He could feel his master's life slipping away, but there was no fear. Instead, there was acceptance, a sense of peace that only a life well lived could bring. "Promise me you'll keep going, keep helping others, just like you helped me." Mr. Daniels' voice broke as he spoke, but there was a calmness to his words that echoed in the room. Max let out a soft whimper, as though in agreement. He understood. It was in his nature to protect, to serve, to be loyal. He had always been by Mr. Daniels' side, but now, in his final moments, the old man was asking him to carry on, to carry the torch. Suddenly, a strange sensation filled the room. Max stood up, his eyes narrowing as he sensed a presence. Something unseen but undeniable. The machines beside the bed began to beep erratically, their steady rhythm breaking down completely. The lights in the room flickered. John turned to the door, his eyes wide with confusion. But Max wasn't focused on the door. He was focused on something deeper, something that he couldn't explain, but that he felt to his very core. The door to the room creaked open, just as it had before, but this time no one entered. Instead, the air seemed to shimmer with an ethereal glow. Max's body stiffened again, his fur standing on end. He barked once, a sharp, commanding bark. But it wasn't at John or anyone in the room. It was at the presence, the force, that seemed to have entered the room without warning. "Max, what's happening?" John asked, his voice cracking with fear. Max didn't respond. Instead, he turned to face Mr. Daniels, who lay still on the bed. The air around him was thick with something unexplainable. And then, in that moment, time seemed to stretch. The ethereal glow grew brighter, and Max's gaze locked with Mr. Daniels one last time. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. And then, without warning, the light faded. The machines returned to their normal rhythm, and the tension in the air lifted. But the change was profound. It wasn't the end of something. It felt like the beginning of something new. Max lowered his head, his tail giving a faint wag, as if he had received some sort of signal from the beyond. And then it was over. Mr. Daniels' body lay still, but his face was serene. Max pressed his nose gently against the old man's hand, as though seeking one final connection. The room, once filled with chaos and uncertainty, now felt peaceful. Max let out a soft sigh, the sadness in his eyes replaced by a deep understanding. He had done his part. Now, it was time for him to carry on. As the minutes passed, the nurse returned, having made the necessary calls to handle the aftermath. But there was something different now. The room was no longer filled with sorrow or pain. Instead, there was a profound sense of peace that seemed to emanate from Mr. Daniels. Max stood beside the bed, his large body still, his eyes scanning the room as though he understood that his role had changed. The nurse, her face a mixture of sadness and awe, stepped forward and gently placed a hand on Max's back. The dog's fur was warm, and there was an undeniable sense of calm that radiated from him, as though he had accepted the inevitability of Mr. Daniels' passing, and was now prepared to face whatever came next. She bent down and whispered, "You've been his guardian, his protector, his best friend. And now, you're the one left behind. But you're not alone, Max. You'll never be alone." Max looked up at her, his eyes filled with wisdom far beyond his years. He had always been a protector, but now, as he stood by the side of his fallen benefactor, he understood the gravity of his duty. He had been entrusted with something more than just a home. He had been entrusted with legacy. The nurse gently pulled a chair beside the bed, sitting down with a sigh. It felt as if time itself had slowed down in that room. There was no rush, no need to hurry. The peacefulness in the air was a reminder that life was fleeting, but love and loyalty could transcend even the boundaries of death. Max lay down next to Mr. Daniels, resting his head on the floor. His tail flicked softly as if reassuring his master that he would be okay. Max didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He would honor his promise. He would continue the work Mr. Daniels had started. Outside, the rain had stopped. The storm had passed, and the world seemed to hold its breath in respect. In the days that followed, Max became more than just a dog. He became a symbol of loyalty, love, and unshakable devotion. The funeral was small, but the message was clear. Mr. Daniels had lived a life full of kindness, and his love for his dog had never wavered. Max was more than just a companion. He was family. The nurse, after reading through the will that had been tucked into Max's collar, was in awe. The will not only left everything to Max, but also established a trust for animal rescue missions, especially for dogs like Max who had been abandoned or mistreated. It was an incredible gesture, one that no one had expected. Mr. Daniels, in his final moments, had passed on a legacy of kindness, compassion, and care for animals. Max, though still mourning, understood. The legacy he had inherited was a responsibility, but it was one he was ready to carry. He had been the protector, the companion, the friend, and now he would continue that role. This time, for other dogs who had no one to care for them. As the months passed, Max became known throughout the community. People were drawn to him not just because of his size or his noble appearance, but because of the story he carried with him. He was a living testament to the love and loyalty that transcended human understanding. Max had lost a friend, a protector, and a companion, but in doing so, he had gained a purpose. The animal rescue organization that Mr. Daniels had set up in his will flourished, and Max, though older now, became the symbol of hope for animals everywhere. His story was shared across social media, in newspapers, and in homes all over the country. Max had become more than just a dog. He had become a legacy, one of love, compassion, and unwavering loyalty. And so, as Max walked down the street, his steps slow but sure, he carried not just a memory of Mr. Daniels, but the promise of a future where every abandoned dog had a chance at a better life. The German Shepherd, who had once been saved from the streets, now saved others in his own way. He had fulfilled his master's wish. And with that, Max walked forward, the future full of endless possibilities, knowing that the legacy of love and loyalty would live on through him.